As you know, we had a great rally in Edmonton on Saturday. Nearly 3,000 people came, mainly from Edmonton, but from all across the province too. They heard from unemployed oil field dads like Chad, from a Fort McMurray booster whose own home burned down in the wildfire, Robbie. He still loves the place, though his house is gone. We heard from Sarah, a farm girl worried about the NDP war on family farms. It was a great talk. Some politicians were there too, including Brian Jean, the leader of the Wild Rose opposition, and Chris Alexander, who's running for the federal Conservative leadership. Andrew Saxton was there too. It was a 2-hour rally, just a great event. Thousands of severely normal Canadians saying they don't want a carbon tax. And they were largely blue-collar folks, not fancy pants, not government union types who were paid to protest. These were the normals, most of whom had never gone to a protest before. They're too busy working or raising their families, but now there's no work and their families are in trouble. It was a family-friendly event, by the way. We specifically advertised it that way. And because we know that people are very mad at Rachel Notley, and with good reason, we politely reminded everyone that no profanity was allowed at the rally. No rude signs, no swearing in the speeches, family-friendly. And it was. Tons of mums and dads and kids too. Everyone had fun. And one of the fun moments, and it was fun, and it was literally 20 seconds of blowing off steam. I watched the video of it later and I timed it, was when in the middle of Chris Alexander's speech, some of the rally-goers chanted, "Lock her up, lock her up," an echo of the boisterous chant that Donald Trump's rallies would have whenever Trump mentioned that Hillary Clinton was under FBI investigation. Now, obviously, Rachel Notley is not under FBI investigation, but it was a fun thing to chant, a fun heckle, really. I told the crowd, no swearing, and they didn't. So they chanted for 20 seconds, "Lock her up." It was fun.
Or we can do the opposite. We can do what Rachel Notley is doing now and send jobs away. Which one's it going to be? We're not going to stand for that.
Now, I had told them no swearing, so that was just plain fun. I mean, you've got 9% unemployment in Alberta, more than 10% unemployment in Calgary. Families are hurting. We heard lots of painful stories at the rally, and for 20 seconds, they blew off some steam with a twinkle in their eye. I was right there. I saw it and I heard it. I mean, I personally didn't join in to the chant, but so what? Because what else could these folks do? The legislature was ignoring them, even though we were standing right outside. Actually, it's not quite accurate. The legislature wasn't ignoring them. Out-of-province NDP mercenaries like Nate Rotman, an NDP dirty trickster from the failed Toronto mayor's campaign of Olivia Chow, he was there smirking at them, and Kirk Heuser, an ex-CBC journalist. Both of these two were hired as mercenaries by Rachel Notley. They were there. They were at the rally. But not to listen to these people. They were there to mock them. And about a half dozen other spin doctors too, dirty tricksters for the NDP. So what else would you do if you were there, if you were unemployed? Look, Rachel Notley doesn't have a mandate for this carbon tax. She didn't mention it during the election. Even if she had, it's punitive, it's sadistic to implement this tax during the worst recession in Alberta in 2 generations. So what would you do if you were there? What can you do when your energy minister is a teacher who knows nothing about oil, had never even been to Fort McMurray before being appointed energy minister? What would you do when your energy minister's advice to unemployed oilmen is to leave and move to BC? What would you do? What would you do when her chief of staff is Graham Mitchell, the former chief lobbyist at an anti-oil pressure group called Lead Now? What would you do? What can you do when the premier herself laughs and laughs and laughs at you, when she rams laws down your throat?
And then there was my favorite bill. But you know, it really is. Anyways, and then there was Bill 6. Now,
what would you do when no one gives a damn about you or your family? When Justin Trudeau gives more money to Quebec's Bombardier Corporation in bailouts than to Fort McMurray to recover from a wildfire? What would you do when Trudeau gives money to every foreign country, when he gives $25 million to the terrorist group Hamas? when he gives $200 million to Iraq, for God's sakes, and plans to pay for it by taxing the oil patch. A prime minister who has said time and time again that he actually hates Albertans.
Regardez, le Canada fait dur maintenant parce que c'est des Albertains qui contrôlent notre agenda communautaire et socio-démocratique. Ça marche pas.
That's what Justin Trudeau says when he was talking in Quebec en français. He tries to be more careful now, but look, these folks can't help it. They talk this way in private all the time, and sometimes it slips out. Take Catherine McKenna, Trudeau's affirmative action pick as environment minister, the one who spent thousands of dollars on a Paris fashion photographer to take pictures of her at a global warming conference in France. Well, her husband is Scott Gilmore, who works for Maclean's magazine. And her husband, Scott, is McKenna's stalking horse. He says things that McKenna's staff try to stop McKenna herself from saying. And look at what Gilmore said to Chris Alexander for speaking at our rally. Lay down with pigs, Chris. You're going to get muddy. Pigs. Do you doubt that Catherine McKenna and her husband, Scott Gilmore, talk this way in private all the time at home, calling unemployed Alberta families pigs? Do you doubt Trudeau and his team do too? Do you doubt that Rachel Notley and her out-of-province NDP mercenaries do too? So what can you do? Who can help you? Who do you go to for help when your own government despises you and dehumanizes you, calls you pigs? The media? Yeah, are you kidding? The CBC, who sent their star, David Suzuki, to attend an anti-pipeline protest riot in Burnaby to stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline, the CBC that deliberately smears the energy industry, including using photographs of polluting Chinese coal-fired power plants in their stories about Alberta to demonize the province with their lies. The CBC, who sends a reporter to the rally, not to report, but to mock and to laugh at the unemployed people there and to chide other reporters who might be too sympathetic. So who are you supposed to look to? Maybe the newspaper columnists of your newspaper of record. Are you kidding me? This is from the Edmonton Journal. They're actually demonizing the 3,000 hurting Albertans, attacking them, just like the NDP did. Here's Brian Mason. Here's Brian Mason, NDP cabinet minister, who claims to be a working stiff. Yeah, sure, working his whole life for government unions and then becoming a government politician. Listen to Brian Mason sneering at real working men and women who don't have a government job for life like he does.
We've seen the hate and violence directed against female politicians in Alberta and across Canada, and this is simply an extension of the same kind of thing.
That clip there was from CBC's The National last night. They turned this 20-second chant into a national news story and used it as an opportunity to invite the entire political class to demonize the 3,000 pigs. The CBC didn't actually show any speakers at the rally. They couldn't care less about Chad from Oilfield Dads or Robbie and his burnt house. They couldn't care less. It was just an opportunity, again, to kick Albertans when they're down for the crime of having a jokey chant about the carbon tax, for not protesting Rachel Notley's carbon tax politely enough. That's the CBC, eh? Holding the people to account on behalf of the government. Speaking truth to power, are you kidding? That could mean Justin Trudeau wouldn't give them their $1.5 billion this year. Picking on unemployed Albertans? Yeah, that's safer. It's unhinged, it's crazy. Here's Patricia Hadju, another Trudeau token appointee. Listen to her, courtesy of the CBC again. The chant was verbal violence, and Chris Alexander was inciting violence towards elected officials. Violence, eh? Or verbal violence. What's that, by the way? Violence, eh? Families, moms, dads, kids, completely legal protest permits, laughing, fun, and you demonize them by calling them violent, really. Here's an Ottawa Citizen columnist, a Marxist named Terry Glavin. Look at the neo-fascist placards. Really. Neo-fascist, eh? Look at these fascists. And all everyone was saying was Trump, 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 the media, Trump, Trump. I get it, because this was a big rally, and Trump had big rallies. And this was a funny and fun chant, poking fun at powerful people, saying things the house pet media don't say. Hey, you unemployed Albertans, you're not being polite enough when you criticize your leaders. Know your place, or we'll call you pigs and violent and fascist, and I'm sure they'll work racist and sexist in there once they figure out how to square that with the fact that our speakers actually included Aboriginal and Sikh and gay and female Albertans. But look, it's not about facts. If it were, all these manic news stories would be about unemployment and the lack of social license for this tax, lack of consent of the government. No. It was about demonizing the rally goers themselves. But for what? For saying lock her up? Are you that stupid? Do you really think this peaceful family protest was literally going to try to lock someone up? You think that's what's going on here? Standing patiently for 2 hours in the cold with a rally permit, listening to hard cases of unemployment. Does any of these sneering, smearing elites actually truly in their hearts believe that this jest, this boast, this joke, this roast, this chant literally meant that they were actually wanted to go, and I guess illegally or violently, throw Rachel Notley in jail? It was a joke, you legion of morons, and you know it, and you're still pretending it was literal so you can demonize and victimize these hurting people once more and be morally superior instead of morally inferior, as you know you are, because you claim to care about the poor and the dispossessed, but you really don't give a damn about Chad or Robbie or Sarah. You really don't, because you hate them for reasons of politics and class and whatever else, and instead of realizing that 3,000 people just said they don't buy your BS, that while you're busy arguing at some UN conference over how many puffs of CO2 dance on the head of a pin, and so you're going to shut down entire coal towns as some moral punishment, while you're living your foolish, leftist, elitist fantasy land in Toronto or Ottawa, real people are hurting. Instead of looking your 3,000 Edmonton victims in the eye and 200,000 more unemployed victims elsewhere in the province, and many more to come, instead of looking at who these people really are and listening to them and showing some empathy or even understanding, you do what you do best in the media, and you sneer and you scorn and you insult and you demonize and you accuse, and you actually accused these unemployed men and women of being violent. That is disgusting, but not surprising, because isn't that what the same media political elite establishment tried to do about Trump and his people for the past year? Racist, sexist, anti-gay, anti-Semitic, violent, white supremacist, whatever. I mean, isn't it the same demonization we saw in the States the past year, where the media elites at the CNN and the New York Times just shouted at the people louder and louder, you stupid proles. Why don't you listen to us, your betters, and vote for Clinton? It's so gross. But the worst of it is not the liberals calling Albertans pigs, or the NDP calling Albertans fascists. That's what they do. It's in their blood. The worst of it is the people who are supposed to stand up for Albertans deciding to throw these 3,000 people under the bus to avoid being lumped in with them. Like Brian Jean did himself on the CBC last night.
I don't think there's any place for it in Alberta politics, and I wish people that have those desires to have those chants or to have those signage would just stay at home.
Like Chris Alexander did himself.
I was taken aback. I hadn't expected it. I was actually mortified.
Like Jason Kenney did, who wasn't even at the rally, who called them ridiculous and offensive. Ridiculous and offensive. And Ronna Ambrose, leader of the opposition federally, she is from coal country, by the way. Here's what she said.
People acting like idiots. It's not only unoriginal, it's completely inappropriate. We don't lock people up in Canada for bad policy.
Really? Brian Jean, Chris Alexander, Jason Kenney, and Ronna Ambrose, you all want the votes of those 3,000 pigs. You want their money. But when the hyper-politically correct, hyper-partisan, malicious, lying press calls them deplorable pigs, the CBC actually had a professor on using that word deplorable. When the CBC calls them deplorable, pigs, and violent fascists, instead of defending your people, you agree with the accusation, you join in, you throw your people under the bus? Why? Why, to save yourself, to win the coveted CBC endorsement, to earn a strange new respect from the media party? How did that work out for Stephen Harper, who had 9 years to privatize the CBC but didn't? How did that work out for him in the last election? Did it buy him a friend? Hey, Brian Jean, do you think you've really built bridges with the Edmonton Journal now. Hey, Chris Alexander, do you really think Scott Gilmore is going to stop mocking you now? Hey, Jason Kenney, do you really think that protesters have no right to offend a premier who is killing their jobs, to offend her with a laugh? Hey, Ronna Ambrose, what have you actually done in the last year to stop the war on Albertans? Look, here's the thing. Pleasing your enemies does not turn them into friends, but it sure demoralizes your friends. And 200,000 unemployed Albertans could sure use a friend right now. When the media and the fancy people came after Donald Trump and his supporters, Trump didn't throw his people under the bus. He didn't disavow them, demonize them, join in the bullying. He ignored the media or even doubled down. He spoke truth to their power. He called the media out again and again as being just as partisan as the Democrats. They were the same thing. He still does it to this day, and it drives the media crazy because it's the truth. How about just once in my life, when a left-wing activist journalist embedded in the CBC, when some NDP hack, who has no problem with actual violence at an anti-pipeline protest or actual law-breaking at Idle No More or Black Lives Matter protests, what about when one of those leftist media hacks asks Brian Jean or Chris Alexander or Jason Kenney or Ronna Ambrose to denounce an Alberta conservative who's out of work? Not even a conservative, just a hurting Alberta family. How about when a malicious gotcha journalist of the left comes and says, hey, I wasn't at the rally, but I totally heard that someone chanted lock her up, and it totally triggered me, and so I ran to my safe space, and I did my adult coloring books, and I looked at pictures of Justin Trudeau till I calmed down, and so like, well, you totally disavow these literal Hitlers. How about just for once when the CBC, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Edmonton Journal, Huffington Post, Vice says that? How about just once a conservative leader says, no, you're the extremist, they're the normal people, you're the vicious ones, they're the victims, you're the sneerers, they need our understanding, you're a cry bully, and I won't be a part of it. How about just once we all tell the media political industrial complex to f*** off? We're not fighting back. We're having another rally this Sunday in Calgary, 2 p.m. at the Westin Hotel. Go to rallyforalberta.com. See you there Sunday at 2.